After getting character after character with ability descriptions reading longer than a college dissertation, I was mildly terrified at having to look at Ciaccona, given Bard class units in games have wordy footnotes to describe the functions of their various skills. The irony is that so far I'd argue Ciaccona's got the shortest ability descriptions among her recent peers, and she's also the first Aero unit to be released in Wuthering Waves since GN. Yes, barring Aero and GN, not a single wind attribute character was released in the game until now, and while that's not really much of a concern given the absence of meaningful differentiation between elements, plans are being implemented to change that, namely in the form of attribute-specific debuffs like Spectro Frazzle. When Aero came out, they introduced another attribute debuff called Aero Erosion, or just Erosion for simplicity's sake. Ciaccona happens to feature the debuff in question within her kit as well, alongside the ability to also apply Spectro Frazzle, raising questions as to whether or not she's a high pull value character in light of both mechanics receiving a lot of attention. So for today, we'll be breaking down Ciaccona's moveset, analyzing her rotations, giving my thoughts on her expected performance in the metagame, and of course a primer on how to build her and who to play her with. Also, if it wasn't apparent, I do sound very different in this video. I apologize for that. I'm recording this while in Japan still, so I hope you can bear with me for this video. I should be back home, by the next one. Anyways, let's get into it. As the first Aero unit in a long time, it could be difficult to surmise Ciaccona's absolute value. The metagame is reaching a point where the idea is to combine at least 2 units of identical elements together, reason being to maximize DPS increases of a certain type, like in Ultra skills and whatnot. For example, Baitu makes for a worthwhile healing alternative in Carlotta parties by virtue of her glacial damage boost not just helping out her, but Jojo's DPS as well. Were the secondary any other element, Baitu will lose considerable value. The same applies to Spectro Teams. Spectrover's ability to apply Frazzle can be used in conjunction with VB to augment Zani's rotation. All of them are of the Spectro element. The biggest issue that surfaced upon the release of Aero was that they simply had no teams or party formations that could even utilize Erosion, which led them to be graded unfavorably from a circumstantial point of view. Adding Ciaccona to the game should alleviate things a bit, as she too can supply Erosion through her abilities. But there's still the underlying problem of there being no Erosion-based main attacker. Does this mean she's not worth pulling for? Not exactly. As you know, Wu's recent 5-star units have been released with the notion of there being plenty of room for them to improve, yet they open up fairly decent right out the gate. Having the option to facilitate either Erosion or Spectro Frazzle could be that saving grace for Ciaccona. Unlike most of the units whose playstyle centers around their Forte circuits, Ciaccona's is more on her basic attack, so we'll start there. 2 noteworthy things. 1. Her 4th basic attack applies a stack of Erosion. 2. After using her 4th basic attack, she summons a tiny sylph that can finish her attack animation for her if it's cancelled for whatever reason, afterwards entering a buff state called Solo Concert, during which all party members gain 24% bonus Aero damage. The duration is extremely generous too, so for all intents and purposes it has permanent uptime, especially when you account for how easy it is to generate more ensemble sylphs. That's all you really need to know regarding her basic attack. Reach basic attack 4, and there you go. Now, onto her skill. Her skill is a blast of Aero damage that also applies an Erosion stack. Ciaccona's skill does create an ensemble sylph should you cast it during her attack animations, however, this one in particular does not make her enter Solo Concert. For you to get the 24% Aero DPS buff, it has to be generated through her basic attack 4. Conveniently, if you buff her normal attack while using her skill, she enters her normal attack rotation, making her very easy to play. So far so good, doesn't look too complicated. Let's continue on with their Forte circuit. Believe it or not, it's actually short enough to fit on one screenshot. Holy shit. Unlike a number of her fellow version 2 members, Ciaccona has only one resource bar, Musical Essence, which can charge up to 3 times by either using a basic attack 4 or her intro skill. Upon reaching full, you can use a heavy attack to strike all enemies in an area, which also pulls them to the center and applies a stack of Erosion. You can essentially think of Ciaccona's Forte attack as Shorekeeper's Forte attack, where you get stacks, and then at full stacks you can heavy attack to group enemies together. Extremely simple character, arguably the simplest among version 2 units so far. Contrary to what its lengthy description may imply, Ciaccona's Liberation is also fairly easy to get the hang of. After opening up with a blast of Aero damage, Ciaccona acquires a buff wherein every 1.6 seconds, depending on which input you press, she deals a blast of Aero damage and then applies a stack of either Erosion or Spectro Frazzle. If you swap out from her during this time, she will automatically apply the recent attack you just did on her. So for example, if you did a Spectro Frazzle attack, switching out will cause all subsequent pulses to apply Spectro Frazzle. If you did Aero, it will apply Erosion. If you swap out before applying any of them though, it will automatically default to Erosion. In essence, you cast your ultimate, then do whichever stack you want, whether Erosion or Frazzle, and then you can swap out to have the remainder of her ultimate duration continuously apply those stacks. Ciaccona's Liberation has incredible overflow uptime with an almost 35-second duration, far exceeding its cooldown of 20. She's very forgiving to play rotation-wise, although it should be noted that if you swap back to Ciaccona after switching out, she loses a buff state. With that in mind, you'll want to hold off on switching back to her until her ultimate cooldown wears off or is at a point where once you finish going about her rotation, it will be back online. I'll explain more about that in the rotation section. Let's continue with the rest of her kit. Ciaccona's intro skill can also apply a stack of Erosion as well, and as the cherry on top, buffering a basic attack will enable you to skip to basic attack 3 to get your 4th basic out quickly upon swapping in. In total, she can apply at minimum 6 stacks of Erosion or 4 stacks of Erosion and 2 stacks of Frazzle, with each of her abilities, Basic Attack 4, Resonant Skill, Forte Circuit, Liberation, and Intro being able to apply them. Naturally, the goal is to min-max Erosion and apply every single stack you can, but the upside of her kit being designed the way it is that missing one component doesn't hurt her DPS too much the way it does on other units. Final thing to talk about would be her passive abilities and natural skill. For her inherent skills, one of them gives her a shield for 4 seconds after using her Liberation, making her decently tanky, although sadly you lose the shield if you swap out. Second passive puts a bit more oomph into her Forte and Power and Heavy attack, pretty straightforward. Her outro skills are reminiscent of Phoebe's Confession outro, wherein Ciaccona causes enemies to take increased erosion damage for 30 seconds. Just like Phoebe's outro, the effect remains active regardless of who the front-running party member is. That's honestly the entirety of her playstyle. Been a long time since we had a character this simple. Good thing too. Not only is it easy to play her, but it's also easy to know what she does and the role she carries. What you're aiming to do on Ciaccona is apply one of everything in her kit. Intro, Basic 4, Skill, Forte, and Liberation. Though there is an optimal way to go about it to minimize field time, as long as you save her Liberation for last, the rest of her stuff can be applied however you see fit, as no one part of her kit is dependent on another to be used effectively.
Hey, editor briefly cutting in here because Ciaccona's rotation has actually changed since Jen recorded the video, but he's still enjoying his vacation, so you're stuck with me for the next minute or so. Basically, if you dash cancel Ciaccona's basic attack 4 after a fully grounded basic attack chain, you'll start your next basic attack chain at basic attack 3, allowing for a super fast and smooth rotation. So your ideal rotation is going to be to use a full basic attack chain through to basic attack 4, dash cancel it, basic attack 3 and 4, dash cancel again, basic attack 3 and 4 again, and then resonant skill to cancel it this time, heavy attack for your Forte, and then Liberation. You will have full concerto for your outro skill at this point, so you can then either swap out immediately if you're in an Aero Erosion team, or you can wait for the first QTE and then select the left option for Frazzle in a Spectro Frazzle team. And you can use her Echo skill pretty much whenever in the rotation since it's a summon, but you cannot use it during her Liberation animation, so you do have to at least use it before that. If you ideally swap to Ciaccona with her intro skill, you'll actually get a free stack of her Forte and immediately start your basic attack chain at basic attack 3, meaning you do one less basic attack chain in that rotation. Super simple, very easy. This repeated basic attack tech is actually the main thing you'll be using when you open up her main DPS playstyle at S6. In that case, you'll actually use the basic attack 3 and 4 dash cancel repeat combo roughly 8 times before using both charges of her skill, heavy attack Forte, Liberation, and then swapping out.
Based on calculations at the moment, and bearing in mind that Ciaccona is missing one final piece to the Aero team, my first impressions of her is in the same vein as Cantarella, where if you're solely concerned about how much value they provide right this moment, she's a pretty solid choice. Good personal damage, easy sell to play, and highly consistent, not to mention the grouping makes her a welcome addition for Wuthering Waves. However, while Ciaccona currently doesn't have a proper niche to call her own, what she can do is fill in a lot of missing gaps, one of which being the aforementioned grouping needs for Whimpering. If you're someone who skipped Rocha or any other grouping character and wants someone self-sufficient to bring along, that's a big reason to grab Ciaccona, offering some value right now with potential room for upside in the near future. If say you're a big Sonny fan but weren't able to or didn't want to pull for Phoebe, Ciaccona can fill in for Phoebe by being the second Frazzle driver. She won't be as efficient as Phoebe mind you, but her consistent application from her ultimate can more than suffice for that role. Consider that those are two highly meritable reasons to pull for the Bard, and neither of them actually pertain to her primary role of driving Erosion. All that's to say, Ciaccona is a multifaceted support who can be a vital asset for a very prominent combat engine right now. And that's not even the one she prioritizes, altogether making her a very worthwhile unit to keep an eye on. As per usual, we'll be wrapping up the video by discussing her sequences and then her teams and builds. Interestingly, the structure of her sequences differs from other units we've seen so far in that they're all equally good more or less. S1 gives her 3 seconds of super armor whenever using her skill, and 10 seconds of 35 bonus attack after basic attacking. Neither of them have cooldowns, which means you can basically treat them as permanent boosts to Ciaccona. It's important to remember that Ciaccona is a sub-DPS character, so improving her own DPS is one way to contribute to your party. S2 is a big one, 40% bonus Aero damage for the entire party while her Liberation is active. This can improve her own DPS, Aeroverse DPS, and the hypothetical Erosion main attacker's DPS by significant margin. Definitely something to consider if you're trying to build a mono Aero team. S3 makes it so using her basic attack 4 will charge 2 points to her Forte circuit instead of 1 for a faster rotation. And it also grants her an additional cast of her skill for 2 at a time, which lowers her energy requirements and grants her more Concerto regen for faster outro skills. S4 makes a Forte empowered heavy attack in Liberation ignore 45% of the target's defense when attacking. Essentially half of her 2 strongest attacks DPS becomes true damage. Obviously, the more damage you get on her and the more defense the enemy has, the more this matters. S5 grants her 40% bonus liberation damage and then 30% damage mitigation to the entire party during Ciaccona's liberation. Damage mitigation is arguably the best form of defense in Wuthering Waves on account of holograms usually striking in bursts. Reducing damage by 30% can be just enough for you to survive a wombo combo to avoid resetting the run. Lastly, S6. Whenever Ciaccona enters her solo concert state or generates a new ensemble sylph, she deals 220% Aero liberation damage to nearby enemies, just a big boost in DPS. Expectedly, being her 6th sequence, this is her best in terms of power increase. I would say for Dolphins though, the one that can be of greatest use to you for your money would be her S2 since we're entering a mono-element meta right now. Now for her teams, I sort of already hinted at how you should play her, but to reiterate, right now there's no fully complete Erosion party until we get a main attacker, but once you do get one, then the obvious choice is to go the attacker, Ciaccona, and Aero for an Erosion party. For the time being, if you have GN, you could potentially go Ciaccona, Aero and GN for your main DPS while we wait for a proper Erosion attacker. Alternatively, you can instead opt to play her for Spectro Frazzle. Unless you really need the healing, you can replace Rover with Ciaccona for more personal DPS. Spectrover's value to Frazzle teams primarily comes from stacks, not really personal DPS. Ciaccona can bring stacks to the table in addition to personal DPS, which I believe is enough to make Zani, Phoebe, and Ciaccona on par with Carlotta, Joja, and Shorekeeper for boss killing. In the event you don't have Phoebe though, you can always do Zani, Ciaccona, and Spectrover. Still an extremely powerful team. TLDR player in a team that uses Erosion or Spectro Frazzle basically. On to weapons. Best weapons of course are signature gun Windland Aria being a crit rate gun and facilitating erosion damage. In fact, that gun helps out the party too as the last part shreds Aero rust. If you want to play her for a Spectro Frazzle team however, while her signature is still good, it's obviously meant for Erosion more than Frazzle. In that case, I would advise statting Mist. Still offers crit rate, but the weapon passive can be more conducive for that type of party. Plus, it lowers Ciaccona's energy requirements, of which she'll need to build more of given she won't have other Aero units to back her up. 4-star weapon-wise, Romance and Farewell's not a bad option considering Erosion counts as a negative status. The problem is that in Zani teams, when she converts Frazzle to Embers, those don't count as a negative status, which can be kind of inconvenient. Echoes-wise, if you're in a Frazzle team, Moonlit Clouds. Most comfortable set to run for any secondary attacker support type like your Sanhua, Mortefi, Joja, etc. Bust out the party, lowers energy requirements, everything you need. Main Echo go for Impermanence Heron. If you're going for a mono Aero team though, you want to swap to the Gusts of Welkin set with the focus on Erosion, in which case Reminiscence for her main Echo. For main stats, even though Ciaccona's a support, once more her personal DPS actually matters, and so you want to spam as much DPS on her as you can. Crit on 4 cost, Aero damage on 3 cost, and attack on 1 cost. You can also go 1 attack, 1 Aero on 3 cost given her solo concert state provides 24% already, and if you have her S2, attack offers more value to her than Aero damage. For substats, go energy until 110 on Moonlit or 115 on Gust, then the usual crit and attack. I'd suggest also trying to score some liberation damage to give more power to her ultimate. Stat priority is the same regardless of set, it's just energy that differs slightly. And that's it for Ciaccona, refreshingly simple character with dual functionality providing great usability now and even more in the future as we get more Erosion based units. Supports are always good to have in your back pocket and the Bard is no exception by virtue of her line of work. Hope you found this video insightful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at FarsFarum, join my Discord server, and check out my other character first impressions videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.